Hello, my name is Jacob Richardson, and I am here to present on the productive and counterproductive behaviors in the workplace assignment. So I'm going to start with chapter 1. So the question is, how have recent historical events affected the course of both research and practice in organizational psychology? And to give several examples. So the thing that sticks out in my mind, and probably yours, is the pandemic. The pandemic changed the workplace and arguably forever. And so I would like to talk about working from home versus face-to-face and some of the challenges that we in studying organizations had to overcome working from home, because there was a big shift in people that were working face-to-face and now they're working from home. So one of the things that I found in our book that were challenges during the pandemic from working from home is camera use. Not everybody knows how to use a camera. And then there was kind of a great divide. Some people would use their cameras and some people would not use their cameras. And there could be several reasons for that. There could be some technical issues, maybe with the computer itself, maybe with the microphone itself, with the camera itself. And then some people chose not to use their cameras because maybe, and these are just some vague reasons, but maybe that they wasn't maybe dressed appropriately. Maybe they wanted to stay in their pajamas. Maybe they had a lot of distractions in the background. Maybe they don't have a dedicated office in their home. And so there could be a variety of reasons, but there did kind of become a great divide in people who would use their cameras and people who would not use their cameras. And research sort of points to that people who don't use their cameras, they are not as engaged in that meeting. And so that was one of the challenges that affected us working from home as a society during the pandemic. Another thing that I found was meeting management problems. And so there was some challenges in people showing up late, too many unnecessary meetings. That was also a potential concern because meetings became convenient. You just had to go online. Often there was a lot of repetitiveness in meetings, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. And again, people showing up late, employees feeling like these meetings were a waste of time, which ultimately maybe left them felt not as engaged as much. And another thing I wanted to bring up that have affected this is working from home, right? Working from home itself can be challenging. We know through research that there was not a great equality from working from home. Not everybody lives by themselves. Not everybody has, as I said, a dedicated office space. But a lot of people, they had families, they had children. They may have to work from their dining room table. And so there was a lot of distractions. There was a lot of chaos. And again, some of the issues that we've already talked about, the camera use, the microphones, that may be some of the reasons why they didn't want to do that, because they didn't have the dedicated space to be as engaged into those meetings. And so these are just several examples and outcomes that was challenging for the research. And the research continues to do that. I want to say that some companies now, both in the news and in research, are kind of pulling back from virtual work. A lot of companies are making their employees come into the office, and some companies have chose to keep up with the virtual work from home, but a lot more structured and a lot more well prepared than it was during the early pandemic. And research continues to come out on this, on the benefits and the pros and the cons of working from home. So it's going to be interesting to see what that plays out in the future. So moving on to chapter 3, it says recruiting hasn't always been tied to organizational psychology, but it is becoming more intertwined with organizational psychology. So I'm supposed to be a consultant, a recruitment director, and this university needs more highly qualified faculty applicants. So how would I do that? And so I actually work at a community college, so I can kind of relate to this to some degree. And that is, for me, I live in a very rural area, and so we don't typically get a lot of diverse applicants. So I was reading, and specifically on page 101 of our book, about sign-on bonuses. I've never been the recipient of a sign-on bonus, but apparently it's very common. In fact, according to our book, 1/3 of employers offer some type of sign-on bonus, which I think is fascinating. Because again, in my world, we don't ever hear anything about that. And so I would like to talk about the pros and cons of a sign-on bonus, and that is what I would maybe try to offer as advice and research for this university. So the first thing that our book mentions about sign-on bonuses is that it can attract what our book calls passive job applicants. And these are potential future employees that they're not actively looking for jobs, but if the right financial motivation comes along, they might apply for the job. And so sign-on bonuses can kind of be that lure, so to speak, for those applicants for those potential applicants that are not actively seeking for a job, but they might be enticed to apply just because of the sign-on bonus. Another pro for a sign-on bonus is travel cost and the cost it comes in. So I would say, 60-mile radius, so to speak, you might not get those folks outside of that radius just because of the big commute. But if you did offer a sign-on bonus, that could entice people to make the travel. They could make the commute. Or that they could actually even relocate. And so if the sign-on bonus is enticing enough, and if the job itself is enticing enough, that this sign-on bonus could kind of be the tipping point that they might relocate, they might find an apartment or maybe a house a little bit closer, they might be willing to move. And so instead of just the job itself, that sign-on bonus might be a little bit more attractive. Now, a con that our book mentions for sign-on bonuses, and I would tell this university just to be mindful of this, sign-on bonuses are a powerful recruiting tool, but it may lack some retention power as well. So sign-on bonuses will be good to increase the applicant pool, which that's the basis of this question. That is what they are looking for. But I would also caution that the retention of these applicants, it may not be as high, because with the sign-on bonus, oftentimes it's a one-time thing. And human beings, we tend to focus more so on the here and now. So 6 months down the road, a year down the road, we're going to kind of forget about that enticing sign-on bonus that we had received. And we might have applied for a job that we may not like as much, but because that sign-on bonus kind of was the lure, our retention of these applicants may not be as high. So I would caution the university that a sign-on bonus, according to research, is more likely to get you that diverse application pool. That will get you that. But just be mindful that the retention of those applicants for your employer, it might not be as high, but that might be something that you can alleviate during the interview. That might be something that you can work on that. But for this question, I believe through research that a sign-on bonus would be a good way to recruit these applicants. So, moving on to chapter 4. I'm consulting with a hiring manager, and I just hired a high performer, and I need to make sure this person stays happy and works for their company a while. Speaking of retention, I respond by getting to know this person, what they need and want, and work-family conflict comes up. And so what advice would I give to this hiring manager to ensure this person stays with the organization? So according to our textbook, there are 5 main types of work-life strategies. So I want to go over those, and I want to go over what research says, and I want to present this to the hiring manager. So first, time-based strategies. So these focus, this is the first one. So this focuses on giving employees flexibility over their schedules. We talked about on chapter 1, teleworking or working from home. That might providing that flexibility might be a big benefit and a big retention component for this employee. And when we say teleworking, we could have a mixed bag here, right? Maybe we could offer a day or two for remote work while they also are required to come to the office maybe 2 to 3 days a week. We could work with them, especially if they have children. Maybe Mondays are not great days for them to come into the office as early, but maybe with the way that the company works, maybe we can afford for them to work from home on Mondays, and that gives them time to do all their Monday things. Maybe their kids have ball practice after school. So we could be maybe a little bit flexible with them and maybe offer this person a day or two of teleworking and providing that opportunity. Location-based strategies is another one that our book mentions. This allows employees to choose where they work. And so this again, given that autonomy, having that communication with them, getting to know them, they may like working in person. Not everybody likes working from home. And so maybe this person, they need that in-person engagement. I don't want to get too off topic here, but maybe some type of personality assessment, or really to where we could get to know the person. An extroverted person typically may find working with others in an office, they may find that more rewarding versus maybe an introverted person where they are just as active and they can get stuff done. They just prefer to do it more by themselves. And so that's something that we could also look at. Information-based strategies is another one. And that is providing the employer with resources and guidance even outside the company. So think about like childcare. While the company itself may not provide childcare, if we can provide a resource, maybe in the surrounding community, to provide childcare, or maybe if they have older parents, maybe that might look like elder care, but providing information-based strategies to help these folks and to retain them. If they are an employee that maybe struggles with time management, or maybe they need some stress management, this also might be an opportunity for us to provide some professional development, and so that they are again reducing that family work conflict. Fourth one that our book mentions is money-based strategies. And this goes beyond the salary. So what I'm thinking about, and going back to professional development, is tuition reimbursement. This is a very common practice in a lot of companies, is that they will pay for your education, or they will pay part of your education if you do decide to go back to school, if you go get a credential, if you go get a certificate, or even an advanced degree, that the company will invest in you. And I know the Walt Disney World Company is famous for this. In fact, I attend and have attended their leadership conference in Orlando, Florida. And that's one of the things they kind of tout about, is that they will pay for your education 100% up into the bachelor's degree. I do think they work with a specific university, but the fact that, they will pay for your education is a great retention tool, because that's also something that you can retain it with. And finally is direct services. So some companies can allow childcare on their campus, vacation programs, so maybe more on-site direct services that could reduce that work family conflict. So moving on to chapter 5. So talking about OCB requirements versus task components on job applications. We know OCBS components are important, but applicants need to be able to do the job itself. So I'm to talk about a current job description and discuss how I would improve that. So ironically, I mentioned I work at a community college, and so we currently have a IT position, faculty position open. So I went and took a look at it, and I was a little bit surprised as well on how vague it was in terms of the task orientation that is needed for this position. So I will read you what it currently states, and then I'll talk about what my recommendations are. So obviously for this position, they need a master's degree in computer science. They need to demonstrate industry experiences in programming. They need to be familiar with the community college mission and teaching practices, excellent verbal and written communication skills, and previous teaching experiences. And while all of these are important, and they should, in cases, be involved in the application, but I want to talk about what I would do. And according to our textbook, it's Campbell's updated model of job performance, highlights performance dimensions. And one of those is the technical performance. And so I think one of the things that I would do immediately is be more specific with the technical expectations. So for example, since this is an IT position, I would talk about, computer repairs, server troubleshoot, programming in different languages like Python and Java, cloud-based management. Now that we are in the AI industry right now, probably your experiences in that. And so I would like to see in the job description more technical aspects of the job itself. And so that way we can get a candidate that not only knows or not only has their master's minimum, but they also have these technical skills, which actually can line better with the job performance. And ultimately, this is better outcomes for the students. And so research is, and research suggests too that it's important for us to make sure the job application has all of those technical requirements. Because one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to have an applicant that can't do maybe some technical things that they're going to have to be trained. Oftentimes these positions, there is a quick turnaround, especially for faculty positions. I know at my community college, it may be different at your university, but at my community college, Lord, they'll hire you, they'll give you like 2 weeks to figure it out, and then you're teaching. And so there's a quick turnaround. And so I would say with a faculty position, I would say it's very important to make sure that they know these technical aspects. And they most likely do with having a master's and having this, but to spell it out in the job description and to make that as detailed as possible, I think make sure that we are attracting the right applicants, and to make sure that the applicants, from their perspective, that they know what they're getting into. And so I would take our job description and align that more technical in that. So, and I believe the final question is, we are a consultant for a large organization, and they've currently had an increase in counterproductive and behavior. I apologize, I have to move my screen a little bit so I can see the question. About folks working fewer hours than what they were hired to do. I was hired to do a audit of the company's policies and the job duties that emerges from the organizational constraints without having specific data. What can we talk about that the company can do to resolve those and reduce the rise in counterproductive behaviors? Spector and colleges proposed that counterproductive work can be classified into 5 categories. And so I'm going to read these and then I'll talk about them. These include abuse towards others, which are behaviors towards coworkers that are physically or psychologically harmful. Production deviance, which is deliberately failing to perform a job task effectively on purpose. Sabotage, which is defacing or destroying an employer's physical property. Theft, which is taking things from others without their consent or knowledge. And finally, withdrawal, which are behaviors that restrict the amount of time to less than one that's supposed to be working. In other words, they are being late to work and they're leaving early. So without having specific data with this scenario, one thing that I would look at is the job expectations and the defined work hours. I would make sure that the employee is well aware of the job expectations and the defined working hours. And then I would make sure there is a plan in place through the supervisor or the manager that there is some type of accountability. It may be that if this is a consistent problem, that one of the things you could do is get the employee in question, have them to check in with the supervisor or manager as soon as they arrive at work, and they have to check back in with them as they leave. This allows for some accountability with that. So an accountability is a powerful tool that we can use to reduce some of these counterproductive behaviors in the workplace. Job satisfaction and burnout, those things that I mentioned before, a lot of those can be stemmed from job burnout and a low job satisfaction. They either feel overwhelmed, underutilized, or disconnected from their work. So one of the things that our book talks a lot about actually is autonomy. And that is trying to get people to have some type of control over the work they do. Our book talked about, and I thought this was so fascinating, is that people generally like to have control over their jobs. They like to make decisions, and they like to be felt like they are part of the company. One of the things we try not to do, or we don't really want to do, is to give someone a small repetitive task that they do every single day and they don't have really any autonomy over the company. Now, obviously, they can't have complete autonomy over all the decisions the company makes, but we can give some flexibility and some autonomy. So our book is very clear on giving that autonomy to employers can help reduce burnout and increase job satisfaction. Ineffective supervision and lack of monitoring, we know, plays a major role. If employees feel like their performance is not being evaluated fairly, if they're being picked out, that could also, they are likely to work fewer hours. And the perception of fairness is another interesting part of research in organizational psychology. Treating everyone fairly, but also understanding the perception of fairness. Do they perceive that as a supervisor or manager that you are treating them on the same level as their peers? We have to be a little careful too, like when we hire somebody new, oftentimes managers and supervisors will spend a lot of time with that person, and as they probably should, because they are getting them acclimated to the job culture and what's expected and everything. But also, if that kind of lingers too long, or if it's overused a little bit, sometimes jealousy and unfairness from maybe the older or the more seasoned coworkers can kind of, maybe some insecurities can come out in that. So it's just always to be mindful from a supervisor and manager perspective that fairness is important. And finally, limited resources and organizational support. This can be outdated systems, poor scheduling, and again, that lack of flexibility could all encourage employers to participate in that reduced work time. So, making sure there are good systems and structures in place, keeping that accountability is important. And that lack of flexibility, if at all possible, that's something I've really taken from these first few chapters of the book, is autonomy. It really helps, and it helps in our personal life, right? If I talk about my job, I like having some type of autonomy in my job. I like making decisions, in my classrooms and stuff. So yeah, so that is the conclusion of the productive and counterproductive behaviors assignment. Please let me know if you have any questions.